Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to another video. Today we are going to be using mint tape in both the 4-inch size and the regular 1-inch size, and I'm going to share a couple of different masking techniques. I truly use it in like every single project, so by the end of this video, if you're not already on the bandwagon, I think you're going to be. And also everything that I used in today's video is linked down below in the description box, and using those links really helps support me, so I really appreciate it. All right, let's get into it. All right, for this first card, I'm gonna do something super simple with the masking tape. So I'm gonna take the 4-inch mint tape. I really like this stuff because it gives you a nice kind of thicker surface area. So if you need to cover more space, this is a great way to do it. So then I'm just going to go in, and I love to tape off kind of sections of the card like this at an angle. So I'm just going to place my piece of tape down, and you'll see this large surface area makes it really easy to cover like half of the card if we want to. And then we can go in and do our stamping. And here I'm going to use the Halftone holiday stamp set. I love this one because the images are made up of a bunch of little dots, so it gives some really great natural shading when we do our stamping. All right, so let's start off with this large poinsettia image. I'm going to go in using a little bit of Bee Sting first from my Simon Hurley Create inks, which is the lighter tone of red. And then I'll go in using a little bit of Game Over, just because I like to add a little bit of shading. And to do this, I'm just gonna take the edge of the ink pad and I'm just going to kind of roll it onto the stamp right around the edges. And this is just going to give it a little bit more depth to the image. So once that's all done, I'm going to take the image and then we can stamp it down. And I'm going to kind of lay it over top of this piece of tape. And by stamping images over the edge like this, it highlights the fact that we masked this off really nicely. Next, I'll bring in some shades of green. I'm gonna start off using a little bit of Later Gator, and then I'll go in with a little bit of Fake Plant and add a little bit of shading using this darker green color. You totally don't need to use several different colors on each image like this. I just like to give it a little bit more life to the images. And then make sure that when you're stamping it over top of the tape, you give a little bit more pressure in those areas because it's stepped up a level. So you just want to make sure it transfers nicely, even right here. All right, same thing. I'll grab 2 shades of brown. We'll use a little bit of Gur, and then I'm going to go in using a bit of Weeping Willow and place that right on the edge. And we'll stamp that down right here. For this ornament, I'm going to use a bit of No Diving for the main color, which is this nice blue color. And then I'm going to go in using Crown Me, which is a nice purple color. These colors blend together really beautifully. And it's also a way that you don't have to use the same exact tone. A blue and a purple is going to mix together really nicely here. Right in the bottom corner here, there was a little bit of smudge, so I'm going to cover that up really nicely with some stamping. And look, nobody will ever know except for you and me. Next, I'll stamp a little bit of holly, and again, I'm gonna go in with these 2 green colors, and then we can fit this image in like a puzzle there and stamp it down. And then last, there's 3 little berries in the set, and I can take one of the berries and just use it as a little filler image to kind of fill in some of the in-between spaces between the images. All right, and then one thing I'm going to do to make this edge even a little bit more dramatic is go in using the same colors I used. So here I'm using that Bee Sting red color, and I'm just going to blend it in onto this edge. And again, by doing this right on the edge, it's just going to highlight the fact that we've masked this off and give it a really nice crisp line right there. And then instead of blending the red into the green section, I'm gonna go in using Later Gator, which is that same color that I used over there, and then go right over top of this area. So I'm just using the same colors that we used to stamp for the border. And look, even though red and green make brown, we didn't get too much there by just lightly blending them together, and they still blend nicely. All right, now for the reveal. This is so much fun. I'm gonna go in and carefully peel off the mint tape. I haven't had any times where the mint tape has ripped my cardstock, but I always recommend kind of peeling back on itself and doing it slowly, and you'll see that really great crisp line that we get from the stamping. So check out just how cool that is. Again, I love those stamped images because they have all those little dots that give it tons of dimension. And I love that really nice crisp edge that we were able to get using the mint tape for a simple masking technique. To adhere this card together, I'm gonna use this fern green cardstock from Spellbinders because I want a nice solid color background to make this stand out. So I'm just going to take this on a top folding stark white card base. And whenever I do this, I always wanna start from the top edge. I'll line it up along the edge of the card, and then that should kind of line it up all the way down there so we can evenly press it down. And the reason I start at the top is in case if this is at all smaller on any of the edges, we can easily cut it off the sides, but you can't cut the top edge because that's where the fold is. So of course, if things need to be trimmed off there from the sides, all we need to do is bring this into a paper trimmer and just trim it off really easily. And then for the sentiments, I'm going to use the Joyful Christmas Glimmer Hot Foil sentiments. And I talk about it a lot, but I love that the sentiments are all together on here, so you can easily foil it in one pass and then die cut them all in one pass too, so you get a lot of sentiments made at once. I keep a nice stash of these already foiled sentiments in the back of the packet so that I don't need to pull out my Glimmer Hot Foil machine for every single card, and I think this green Joy to the World is going to work perfect on this project. Alright, and there is that finished card. I love the shine that that foiled greeting has, and that really great stamped card. It's super easy to do, but I love the beauty that that contrast adds to the masked edge of the background. Alright, for this next card, I'm going to let VoiceOver Simon take over and share how to use the mint masking tape for masks using your coordinating dies. Alright, so for this card, we're starting off with the Winter Woodland stamp set. I love this one because it's got some great outline images of all these cute little critters we can use on our card. Today I'm using the two little polar bears, so I'm going to take those off of the clear sheet and place them onto the front of my card how I want them positioned. Then I'll pick it up with a Simon Hurley Create acrylic block, and we're going to do some stamping. So here I'm using some VersaFine Nocturne black ink, and I'm going to stamp that right down onto the front of my card exactly where I want these polar bears to be. We can give it some good pressure to make sure it transfers, and then I'm going to clear heat emboss these. Whenever I use this pigment ink, I love to clear heat emboss because it takes a little bit longer to dry, and the clear heat embossing gives it a really great shiny finish. So I'll go in there and heat set that so that it turns clear and shiny, and then we can move on to the next step. For this, I'm going to use the 4-inch mint masking tape, and I'll rip off a piece, and this is perfect for using as kind of masking paper because there's so much surface area on it. So here I'm using the coordinating die set to that Winter Woodland set, and we'll pull out the two polar bear images. And to cut these out, I place down the mint masking tape onto my die cutting plate. I'll place the two polar bears on top and then run this right through my die cutting machine, and it'll cut those out perfectly. Then we can rip off any of the excess, and this is going to give us two masks. Now when I place these over top of my images, you can sort of see through the mint tape a little bit, which is really helpful, so we can line it up. All I do is kind of place it down so we can see the bear underneath, and make sure it's got an even border before we press it down and make sure it's nice and stuck over top of those images. Then I'm going to go in with another piece of this 4-inch mint masking tape, and I'm going to cut out kind of a hill. So I just cut out some curves on there, and we're going to keep the top and bottom section. First, we're going to use the bottom section, and we'll place it down right below those bears to create a nice hill scene. And this is going to mask it off so we can color in the sky. For this, I'm going to use some Simon Hurley Create inks, and these are my favorite colors for creating a nighttime sky. I'm starting off with a little bit of Over the Moon, which is this nice sort of buttery yellow color, and then I'll blend it into some rosy cheeks. And to blend all these out, I'm using foam domed blender tools. I really love these to get a nice smooth blend in between colors and not get any harsh marks. Then to transition into purple, I'm going to use Triple Berry, which is kind of this purpley pink color, so it blends really nicely into the rosy cheeks. And then I'm going to go into No Diving, which is this nice rich blue tone, and it'll blend really beautifully together to make that purple even a little bit darker too. I love how just seamlessly these inks blend together. It's one thing I really love about my inks is they blend beautifully. So then I'm going to finish it off at the top with a little bit of Midnight Snack to really darken up this sky. Then lastly, I'll go in using a little bit of Shady, which is this really dark, almost black, like charcoal gray color, and it's perfect for adding even more depth to these images. So when I blend it over top of that dark Midnight Snack, it's going to even give more intensity and make this nighttime sky really nice and dark. Now to add some texture and detail to this background, I'm going to go in using the Sweater Weather stencil. I thought this almost looked like snowflakes or stars, and it's going to give some great texture. So I'll lay that down, and then I'll spray over top some water. And my inks react really beautifully with water by kind of lifting the ink off the surface and lightening it a little bit. So I'll check before I peel off the whole thing, and it has a great reaction already. And then I can go in and lift off some of the excess water. To aid it in drying, I'm going to go in using a heat tool here and help it dry. And you'll see as it dries, it creates an even more intense reaction and creates a really nice light color where we sprayed that water. Then I'm going to go in and lift off the mint tape, and you'll see that even with that bit of water that we added there, it creates still a perfectly nice crisp line, and that's what I love about it. So then I'm going to take the other side of that mint tape that we cut out. That's why I love that it's so thick, because we can use that other side to then mask off the bottom section. And down here I want to add just a little bit of shading. So wherever there's kind of white snow or white on a card, you want to add a little bit of shading in that scene. And so here I'm adding just a little bit of gray to that top edge. A little bit goes a long way here. It's not going to look like much until we peel off the tape. But when we do, you can see here it just gives a nice subtle difference and really gives some good shading to that snow. And then we can peel off the masks of the polar bears, and again, there was a lot of water on there, but that line is really nice and crisp. And since we used those coordinated dyes, it also gives a little bit of a white border, which helps it stand out from the background. Now to watercolor these in, I'm going to start off with a paintbrush and a little bit of water, and I always like to add a wash of just plain water right before we go in with the color. This is going to get the surface of that cardstock ready to take the water, and it's going to help, instead of the color just sinking right in, it'll kind of sit on top of the surface more so we have time to blend it out. Then I'll go in with a little bit of light gray, and we're just giving a little bit of shading to these polar bears. Again, same thing, a little bit of gray goes a long way. So we'll add a little bit of gray kind of around the edges, and then you'll see that I keep dipping back into the water, because when we want it blended back out to white, you just go back in with water and it'll really help kind of blend it all together perfectly. Now once that's dry, I'm going to go in and test out my sentiments. I love to kind of move around the clear sheet to see which sentiment's going to work best. And I ended up choosing the Walking in a Winter Wonderland stamp. So I'm going to place that down in my MISTI stamping tool to make sure it's nice and straight, and I'm using this to make sure we don't ruin our card right at the end. And then we can stamp that down using some black ink and give it some good pressure to make sure that it transfers. And again, I used the MISTI just to make sure that it transfers perfectly. So if we want an even darker image, we can go in again and stamp it down to make sure that we get a nice, intense image. To finish that off, I'll throw over a layer of clear heat embossing powder and heat set it until it's clear and shiny, and I love that nice shiny finish. And here's a look at that finished card. I really love how it turned out using the mint tape as masking paper and creating this really adorable scene using those two polar bears from the Winter Woodland stamp set. I just love how that bright background turned out. For this next card, I want to use the Candy Stripes cover plate die. I really love this one, and I want to show how you can use it as a mask, sort of like a stencil, instead of using it just as this die. All right, so again, I'll pull out a piece of the 4-inch mint masking tape. As you guys can see, I really love this size. It's great for so many different techniques. And then I'm bringing in the new Spellbinders and Scrapbookcom black die cutting machine. This is super cool. I love the sleek design of having a black die cutting machine. And I'm just going to place my piece of 4-inch mint masking tape down onto my die cutting plate, and then I'll go in with the cover plate and place it right down on top. All right, and then we can easily run this right through. And the awesome part about this is it cuts all of these little strips of the mint masking tape. You could do something similar with paper trimmer too, but I love that this cuts out even lines every time. It's just another great way to use your cover plate die. So now we can use these as masks and create our own sort of plaid pattern. All right, so I'll grab these off. I'm using a little tweezers here to get them right off. And then I can go on to my piece of stark white cardstock, and I'm just going to start placing these down and then adhering them nicely. And you don't have to follow exactly how the die cut them out, but again, I just like that the strips are even so we can create our own pattern with them. I'm gonna go too thin next to each other. All right, so I'll just keep pulling these strips off and creating my own sort of striped pattern down the card. And then once I'm done, just give it a nice press to make sure that everything is pushed down so we can do our ink blending. For this, I'll start off using a little bit of Game Over, and we're gonna start in the corner with our darkest color here. I'm using some of the foam domed blending tools, and I'm just going to start blending our color on the surface. I want it to be darkest in this corner and then fade it out to a much lighter kind of pink color at the top. Next, I'll bring in Love Struck, which is this perfect sort of berry red color. It's kind of a mix between a pink and a red. And then I'll go in here and blend this right with the Game Over color. I really like how these blend together. I love that with the mint tape, it sticks super nicely so you don't have to worry about it moving, but then it also doesn't rip your cardstock. So it really gives you the best of both worlds. And then I'll blend it up top here with some Prom Queen going right into that super hot pink color. And I'm just going to blend this out. And what I love about my colors is they're super easy to obviously blend together, but I also like that we can blend it into the white cardstock and not get any harsh marks as we're kind of fading it out into the white, which I really like. Not all inks do that. So just use a little bit of lighter pressure and then take any of the excess ink that we have to kind of fade it off into that white, and look how smooth and beautiful that blend is. All right, and then I thought it would be fun that with this, I'm going to then take the Pinstripes background stamp. I'm going to take it with a little bit of water in a mister, and I'm just going to spray over top of the surface of this background stamp so that we get this stripe design, and I'm going to stamp it in the opposite direction that we have our blender, right? So I'm just going to stamp this down with just the water, give it some nice pressure so that it hits all of the areas on the surface of that ink blended cardstock. And what this is going to do is it's going to react with our inks, and it's going to give it a really beautiful striped design in the opposite effect. Now, this is going to kind of keep reacting with it, so if we want it to stop reacting and we want it to kind of start drying instead of still bleeding out, we can then go in with our heat tool, and heat set this to dry it quickly. And if I want to kind of fade that edge out a little bit more, I'll just use a little bit of water to help blend that in with the rest of the cardstock. I love how that water reacted and created the stripes in the opposite direction, but I do want to let you guys know that if you want it to bleed less and be more of a crisp design, just use less water. Here it bled quite a bit, so I feel like I used a little bit too much water, so I'll take notes for the next time, but if you're doing this at home, use less water if you want a more crisp result. The reason why I showed you all that water is because I wanted to show you that the mint tape will even withstand all of that water. So check this out, even as I peel off these mint tape strips, no matter how much water we used, it kind of resisted that and is gonna give a really nice crisp line all the way across. It really is so cool and kind of surprising actually that even with throwing all of that ink and water at the mint tape, it doesn't bleed underneath it and it still gives a beautiful crisp line to your design. To finish off this card and balance it out nicely, I want to use that same Halftone holiday stamp set, and I'm going to use the holly image, and I'm just going to use a little bit of Later Gator green ink all the way around. I'm kind of avoiding the berries that are in the center. And then again, I'll use some fake plant for some shading, and I'll do that all around the edges of these leaves by rolling on the ink pad. And then to finish off the coloring, I'm going to use a little bit of bee sting, and I'm using a detailed blending tool, which is this small little foam on the end of this wooden dauber, and it allows me to get into much smaller spaces. So here I'm going to fill in the berries with a little bit of red in the center. It does a great job at doing that. And then I can go in and stamp this out nicely. And you can see it colors it in just beautifully. And again, all of those little dots create some really great shading and depth in the image. This stamp set has a great coordinated die set that you can purchase it along with to cut out these images really easily. And of course, one of my favorite purposes for mint tape is to use with die cutting. So I'm gonna use the 1-inch mint tape. We'll line this up with a nice even border all the way around the image. And then we can tape it down to secure it in place. And one thing I love about mint tape is even after you put it through the die cutting machine and it's applied all that pressure, I still find that it doesn't rip the cardstock, which I really like. Then again, I'll place it in my sleek new die cutting machine and we'll run this right through to die cut it out. And once we've run it through our die cutting machine, you can see this pops out so easily and you've got a nice white border all the way around it. All right, then I'll place that piece of holly on some foam tape to pop it up. And then I'll put down a Merry Christmas sentiment that I've foiled in red using that same Joyful Christmas sentiment set. I've gotten so much use out of the Joyful Christmas sentiment set this year because it really makes those sentiments super easy to kind of mass produce them for Christmas cards. All right, and there is a look at the finished card. I really love how that bold and graphic background turned out, using a bit of that 4-inch mint tape along with the Candy Stripes cover plate. And then we finished it off with that beautiful stamped holly image and the nice shiny Merry Christmas sentiment. All right, you guys, I hope you really enjoyed today's cards. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up and leave me a comment down below letting me know which card was your favorite. Also down there is a full supplies list to everything that I used, and using those links helps support me, so I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for stopping by and spending time with me, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye!